right. Well, welcome all to the final cybersecurity meetup for 2023. We're still in 2023, right, Anil?
I believe we are for 4 days.
Good. We're doing a little bit different format today. We're doing it from our conference room instead of all of us sitting in front of our computers. We thought it'd be a little bit more fun and more interactive. So we are very happy that you could join us today. As always, this is a session that we'd like to be interactive, so feel free to ask questions. There is a Q&A button that is available to you on the screen. Use it if you have any questions while we go through this. With me today are my partners in crime, Jeff Dix, our Chief Security Officer, and then Anil Malwani, who wears two hats, our Service Manager, but also our Senior Cybersecurity Analyst. So today we are going to talk about 2024, do some predictions about what we can see in the cybersecurity landscape going into next year. You guys ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. All right.
So nice to be in the same room with each other. It's like, a little more human contact. Normally we're all isolated in our little offices. Yes, it's good to be in the same room.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. So we're going to do this in the form of questions, and I will pose the question. And then whoever wants to can jump in and answer, and hopefully it will stimulate some feedback from the folks that are watching us out there in cyberspace. So the first one, will Microsoft make any changes in the way that multi-factor authentication works for Microsoft 365 and Office 365?
I predict that is going to definitely happen. Microsoft's been notifying us over the last few months that they intend to migrate away from SMS texting as an authentication method, as well as calling a direct call to an office phone. So that is no longer going to be supported as of sometime in March. I kind of expect a little pushback from folks, so they might delay that, but definitely SMS texting and MFA calls to direct phones is going away. They really want people to use the Microsoft Authenticator application, which is going to be the most secure method for 2FA to Microsoft services and applications. But they will also continue to support one-time password services such as what Google provides. So definitely some changes there.
Why are they moving away from that? What's the logic behind it?
Well, a lot of it, like SMS texting is basically, it's not encrypted. So the messages are going across the internet. So if somebody gets their phone, their high-tech phone cloned, potentially that text could go to not only the end user, or it could be rerouted from going to the end user to whoever's cloned their phone. So it's not a secure method as well. As far as the direct dial into the phone, I'm not sure about why that would be less secure. I think they really just want to move people towards the Microsoft Authenticator app so that they have complete control of authentication and increase the security of connections to Microsoft services and applications.
All right, fair enough. Anil, any additional insights there?
Nothing. As Jeff pointed out, they're really trying to get everyone to use the Microsoft Authenticator app, but you can use other ones. That's been, I think, a bit of misinformation that's been spreading out there on the internet that it's going to be Microsoft's way or the highway, but there are alternatives, so you can use different methods. I also read an article, I don't know how valid it is, that it's costing Microsoft like millions to send text messages and phone calls.
Yeah,
and so, at the end of the day, Microsoft's a for-profit organization, and they can save a little bit of money by sending a push to your phone via the internet as opposed to having to use the old infrastructure that costs them money. They're going to do that. So,
yeah. All right.
No doubt.
Okay. All right. And Neil, I'll let you take the lead on the next one, which is something actually a lot of people have been asking me in the last few months. Will we see an increased use of artificial intelligence, AI, in cyber attacks in 2024?
Most definitely is my opinion on that one.
Boy, I wish I had my 8-ball.
I know, right? Most definitely would have answered the question for us all. Yes, I mean everyone knows that ChatGPT has been getting a lot more usage, and a lot of the other AI tools that are out there on the internet have become much more commonplace. And so people have been using that. The bad guys use that where they can, and they even spin up their own versions of it that don't have the restrictions and regulations that things like ChatGPT do have, so that they can bypass and say, "Hey, can you really write me, the perfect email to the CEO of, a nonprofit organization to get them to click on this link and do nefarious acts?" So I think that's going to be a big increase especially in things like business email compromise, where they'll be able to get people to click on links and open attachments because it's going to look really like it's a legitimate email. And on top of that, deepfakes, which basically means impersonating someone, getting a phone call or getting a text message from somebody that you think is a person that you recognize, and really it's an AI that's being commanded to do what it's being told to do. I think there's going to be another increase that we'll see in 2024. As the bad guys leverage these more, we're going to see these kinds of cyber attacks happening more regularly.
Yeah, in fact, we've already seen some voice fakes being used actively to support business email compromise, where somebody calls in pretending to be the CEO and says in a voice that's exactly like the CEO's, "Hey, I need you to transfer money to this account right away. I don't have time to talk, but if you have any questions, email me," or whatever. And then they basically, the person who's getting the call says, "Well, that sounds like Lewis, like he's in a hurry."
Legitimate request.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why he wants to change my payroll at the end of the year, but
Yeah.
He called me and he sent me an email.
At least I'm not asking for iTunes cards, right? So that's a big thing. But no, it's a huge concern because if you have any sort of recording of your voice or even your face, I've done a lot of speaking. It's I do the radio segment twice a week, and so my voice is out there on our website for anybody to download and copy to their heart's content. And it is interesting to see that what we have done as a service to provide our clients additional information can now be used against us, right, as by the bad guys. So, Jeff, what do you think is the real danger in deepfakes?
I think it just AI in general just makes the attacks, the BEC, the business email compromise attacks, more effective, and it's more efficient. So we're going to talk a little bit later about the fact that business email compromises are now starting to outpace and to catch up and surpass ransomware as the primary threat in today. Basically, it's ransomware and business email compromise. So it's just AI is going to help shift the focus away from ransomware to business email compromise.
Well, that was my next question, so we'll just get right to it. So the prediction is that BEC, or business email compromise, will surpass ransomware as the number one form of a cyber attack against all businesses, but in particular small and mid-sized businesses, because they typically don't have the level of sophistication and protections in place to defend against it, and they don't have the tools deployed to be able to detect if they've been compromised.
Yeah, there's no malware involved. There's no malicious code involved. It's just a regular email that's been crafted as a phishing email, backed up and supported by AI, which makes it more effective and makes it more difficult to detect because there's no malware or bad software associated with the attack.
So, Anil, let's do a little bit of a deep dive into business email compromise. So what is a BEC and how does it happen?
So there's a couple of different methods of BEC, or business email compromise. I think the one that people are looking at most common is a phishing email, or like spear phishing. So it's targeted specifically like the CEO, CFO, controller, somebody who can make a decision and make changes immediately. We see it quite a lot with accounting folks too. There was one not that long ago I read where a vendor got compromised and their purchase order form was duplicated exactly, like perfectly, and then sent to the accounting people at an organization, And they looked at it, and it looked all legit to them. The purchase order was in the right format. Everything was correct, except the account number and the routing number were different. They're like, okay, so this vendor must have changed their accounting info and forgot to tell us.
Something that might happen occasionally for any organization.
Exactly. And so they wired the money to the new account, and sure enough, they wired the money to the bad guys. So the bad guys had infiltrated the vendor and sent that on to the organization, and that's a classic example of a business email compromise. It didn't happen at the organization itself, it happened at the vendor's end. But those are the kind of things we see so often. And I think the big reason the BEC is going to become so much larger than ransomware is, as a business term, because, the bad guys are in business, it's a very quick return on their investment. Mm-hmm. So whereas nowadays, I think there's a lot more tools in place that make sure things like ransomware and malware don't infect networks. Even for smaller companies, the tools have gotten a lot more sophisticated. But at the end of the day, if the end user is looking at an email and isn't sure what they're seeing, and they're clicking on the link or opening the attachment without paying attention, that's their quickest entry into the network to start getting some money out as fast as possible.
Yeah, they get their money in dollars and it's transferred directly to their account. Mm-hmm. So with traditional ransomware attacks, usually cyber insurance company gets involved, and there's negotiations with the cyber insurance company on behalf of the organization that was being ransomed, and that transaction is also usually typically done in Bitcoin, which is very difficult for a large organization, especially for a large amount of Bitcoin. To facilitate that transfer of the Bitcoin to the threat actors, it's just inefficient compared to a successful business email compromise attack.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that we come in to help people after they've been, subjected to a BEC attack. And banks, as much as they would love to help you, they can't. There's no, unlike a credit card fraud where there's a $50 limit for, most consumers. So if somebody takes your credit card and charges thousands of dollars, you're on the hook for $50 and that's it. The rest of it is on the, either the retailer or the credit card company. When money is transferred from your bank account to another bank account, your bank can't do anything about it.
That's right.
So there's the only thing that can help you there is, number one, if you put processes in place with a bank to say, hey, if there's a transfer of X amount or over, make sure you do a phone call. Some companies are actually doing that now. They're implementing processes with their banks and saying, if I transfer money or somebody from my organization transfer money to a new account, call us or let us know and ask for confirmation. Or if you have cyber insurance, which does protect, there's certain limits, but if you have cyber insurance, there are ways that you can file a claim to get back some or all of the money, depending on the amount of money that gets transferred. So a plug for cyber insurance, if you don't have it, are interested in getting it, please reach out to your own insurance broker. If they're not helping you, call us. We have partners that can help find you the right policy and get you all set up. So let's move on to something that most people I guarantee you are nowhere near aware of, but it's going to have a huge impact on a lot of organizations, especially organizations like nonprofits that send out mass emails to solicit donations, as well as folks like us that have a large mailing list where we send out newsletters and things like that. And that is, what will the enforcement, here's a question, what will the enforcement of, and this is a big word, a big phrase, so bear with me, what will the enforcement of domain-based message authentication reporting and conformance, DMARC for short, by Google and Yahoo mean for businesses? So what will the enforcement of DMARC mean for businesses?
Well, DMARC is a service that can validate the source sender of email. And what it helps cut down on is impersonation of somebody impersonating someone else to send email from that person on that person's behalf. So what's gonna happen? It's a really good service. It's a little tricky technology wise to implement, but it can make an organization's email very much more secure and reduce the amount of phishing attempts that might be done on an organization's behalf from an It's just for me. Now, in the marketing sense, there's a lot of companies that send out a lot of email via a third-party mass mailing or third-party marketing company.
Like MailChimp or
like MailChimp, Constant Contact, those kinds of services. But organizations like Gmail, which is probably the second largest holder of email in the country.
63%.
63.
Of all email goes through Google.
Yeah. Well, Google is going to require those senders now to be set up with DMARC so that they can guarantee that the emails that they're receiving on behalf of their clients, 63% of Americans that use it, don't get invalid marketing messages.
Mm-hmm.
So for an organization that's sending out lots of marketing emails, it's going to be very crucial that they get on DMARC as soon as possible, because eventually Google will start rejecting those emails that don't come from a DMARC sender.
There actually is, Google and Yahoo have come out with a deadline of February of 2024.
Wow, that's not certain thought.
Yeah, where they will start enforcement of DMARC, which means that, and just to not go all geeky on you, but what happens with DMARC is there are certain settings in the DNS system that need to be implemented and validated, and not just implemented, validated once. This is a constant process that has to be maintained and updated, because changes do happen in DNS, so you have to be aware that once you set DMARC, you still have to monitor it and make sure that it's valid. So it's complicated, to say the least. That's why a lot of organizations haven't implemented DMARC, even though it's been around for a decade or more. It's not something. It's really not anything new.
Right.
It's just now that Google through Gmail and their Google Workspace, as well as Yahoo, it's also one of the largest email services out there. They've gotten frustrated by the number of impersonations out there and false emails that are going around, and they're said, we're drawing a line in the sand. As of February, if you are not implementing DMARC, we're not going to let your emails flow through us. And what that's meant is companies like Blackbaud, for example, they're big in the nonprofit sector. They, provide nonprofits with email services to send on their behalf. Excuse me. But Blackbaud is pushing those organizations, saying, hey, you have to implement DMARC and make sure that we're cleared and we're validated, and DMARC is set to allow our emails to go through, or we're not going to send your emails. Because if we do, we're going to get blackballed by Google and Yahoo, and not only will that affect you, but it will affect everybody for whom we send email. So we're not going to take that risk. So if you're a nonprofit out there and you send out volumes of email, you need to implement DMARC, or you're going to find yourself, or really any organization that sends out volumes of email, whether you're a nonprofit or just a marketing house, or you just have to have a large mailing list, implement DMARC. And the last thing I'll say about DMARC before we move on is our friends at CPOD Cyber, they're a cyber insurance broker that we work with, have told us that DMARC will also be a requirement for cyber insurance renewals and new policies in 2024, regardless of the volume of email. So even though Google and Yahoo are enforcing it for large volumes of email, the cyber insurance companies, they don't care. They're going to say, no, you have to implement it, even if you don't send out that many emails. We want to make sure that all your emails are legit and that you're doing everything you can to prevent yourself from being a victim of phishing.
And it's important you get started quickly, because it does take a few months to get an entire DMARC implementation started to the point where it's enabled fully, because there's a lot of monitoring that has to go on, a lot of DNS changes that have to happen over time. So it's not difficult, doesn't require you to buy anything. It just requires you to hire a provider that can do the service work and monitor and make sure that legitimate email is not getting blocked or missed. So start early on your DMARC implementation.
So give us a call if you're interested. We offer that service for our clients, as well as anybody else that is interested in becoming a client. So we're open to all takers. All right. Let's go for DoD contractors. After years of waiting, will the Department of Defense finally require cybersecurity maturity model compliance, or CMMC compliance?
It looks very good, but I'm hesitant to say it's going to happen because we've been saying it's going to happen for years now. The cybersecurity maturity model CMC program for DoD contractors has been in the works for many years. The rules have been written, and then have they been approved by Congress? So the rulemaking,
as of late December, the final draft rule was released by the Department of Defense. So that set into motion several things. So the final draft rule is basically the Department of Defense saying, okay, we have the program in place, CMMC. Here are the rules that govern how it's implemented, who has to adhere to it, what all the details of implementation look like. And we're sending out this final draft of the rule to the public and giving them 60 days to comment and give feedback to us. And that's what we're at right now. So we're in that 60-day comment period, which will last into early February. And at that point, the DoD has typically between 6 and 18 months to respond to all the comments. And then at that point, they make any changes that they want to make, but then it's finalized. Unless there's a significant amount of changes, in which case it's re-released as another draft. However, in this case, so much work went into creating this draft rule over the last 24 months that the Department of Defense is feeling pretty good that this is not going to change significantly. So what we expect to see is by the end of this year, or by the end of 2024, for sure by the beginning of 2025, the CMMC requirements will be written into contracts that the Department of Defense sends out for solicitation. And Anil, do you have to be CMMC compliant before you bid on a contract or after you get the contract?
Before you bid on the contract. Yeah. Which means you should have started your journey a long time ago, even though it's taken this long to get the rules to this point where they're actually starting to reach final ratification. If you haven't started your journey, you really need to get started now, because depending on where you are in your cybersecurity journey and where you are in your maturity as an organization, you could be talking 6 months to 12 months, maybe longer.
Even longer, yeah.
Get yourself up to even a basic CMMC level 1 certification to be able to pass that initial assessment and audit. So, if you're still wondering if you are working with the Department of Defense, if you're a contractor or a subcontractor, and you haven't started looking at this CMMC, that's got to be your number one goal.
You're already behind.
Yeah, you're ready behind. Yeah. So yeah, definitely give us a call. We can get you started.
Yeah, and there's 350 something thousand DoD contractors, and all of them will be required to be CMMC certified at least at level 1. Some of them at level 2, very few of them at level 3, but the vast majority of folks are going to be at level 1. And that still requires preparatory work and attestation. Even though it's a self-assessment, you still are signing on the bottom line that you're doing everything that's required.
Exactly.
And if you lie, you're liable for fines, and you might be banned from any sort of government bidding
on any contracts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And by the way, the not so hidden secret is that a lot of other government agencies, NASA, Homeland Security, those are the two that I know off the top of my head. I think FDA is another one that's been mentioned. A lot of these other federal agencies are waiting for CMMC to be finalized, and then they're going to jump on the bandwagon because they don't want to develop their own cybersecurity standards, but they have the same obligation to protect confidential government information. And so rather than recreate the wheel, they're just going to wait till CMMC gets finalized and then adopt it as their own, is what we're hearing. So even if you say, yeah, I'm not a DoD contractor, not a problem for me. If you do any sort of government contracting, it's going to be a problem for you sometime in the next couple of years. So be aware of that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to sit down with you and explain what the program is and how you can get ready for it. All right. So we have about 5 minutes left. If you have any questions, feel free to fire them toward us. But let's move on to one last question. What does the new Security and Exchange Commission SEC reporting requirements for public company mean for all businesses?
That's a big one, and that's actually already in place. So I think the prediction is that's going to be huge. That went into place, I want to say it was the 13th of December, so just a couple of weeks ago. Any organization of any size, any industry, if you have any sort of cyber incident that involves, money being lost, whether it be business email compromise or ransomware, you have 4 days in which to notify the Security and Exchange Commission that this happened.
Wow.
And a lot of organizations, as I'm sure we can think, they don't want to make things public if they don't have to, but this is a new requirement, so there's no more bury your head in the sand and pretend it didn't happen and sweep it under the rug. You've got to report it, and it's really going to, I think, shed a lot more light on just how many organizations out there are getting cyber attacks and haven't been notifying any entity so far.
Is there much information out there on where you report? I mean, SEC is basically in New York and Washington. Do they have any kind of a system set up for the notification?
You email, I've been hacked at SEC.
Seriously?
No. I was thinking it from it.
Yeah. It's probably a
I
website.
think it's on the website. You go in there and file it through there, and it walks you through a form to submit all the information, and then if needed, they will follow up and investigate further.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. It's probably worth us going checking it out so we can refer our clients to it.
Well, what's interesting is, we've been doing work with clients who are have HIPAA requirements for years, and we all know about the wall of shame, where organizations that have been hit by HIPAA violations, their names get posted up there, and it's publicly,
that's right.
available.
Yep.
Just Google HIPAA wall of shame, and you'll find it.
Exactly.
But it's interesting to see that the other organizations government agencies are following along that path, because the reality is we don't know how many cyber incidents there are, material cyber incidents, which means that there's an actual loss that comes of it, whether that's lost time because somebody's shut down and they can't work because ransomware has infected their systems, or they've actually been compromised with business email compromise and sent money someplace. But most people don't like to report that. In fact, a lot of organizations, even when they do have cyber insurance, prefer just to say, you know what, it's not worth the headache. Let's just move on. And
It's like car insurance.
Yeah. But that distorts the statistics. And I think the government and internationally, I know governments all over the world are looking to try to shore up their, cybersecurity threat protections, but they need more information. And this is one of those things that the SEC is saying, look, you need to tell the people that have invested in your, like the shareholders, that this happens so that they can be aware of it. And more importantly, you have to tell the consumers and the customers. And I just read this morning about the Xfinity hack, that all of us who are Comcast or Xfinity clients have been compromised, 36 million users across the country. Something that, happened to Comcast back in October that they just revealed this month. And the SEC is going after them for not reporting it. They've had plenty of time since December 13th to report it, and they've known about this for several months, and they chose not to report it. So I think the SEC is going to come after companies who don't do this kind of reporting. And even though we're talking about public companies, I think that's going to bleed into private sector companies as well. So this is not just everything that, happens at the enterprise, the top level, eventually bleeds down to everybody else. So it's, take heed and prepare for something like this, and have a great incident response plan in place. And if you need help with that, we can help you as well. Because incident response planning is something that we're expecting is going to be a big requirement for cyber insurance policies as well into 2024.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, gentlemen, we're at the top of the hour.
Bottom of the hour?
Bottom of the hour.
Middle of the hour.
Bottom of the hour. Session, anyway. So any final thoughts before we close it off. Any last minute questions out there?
Nothing out there per se, but one thing that I have as a separate prediction, just because 2024 is going to be a general election year, and we all know that the moment that we start getting, presidential elections going, there's a lot of cyber attacks and propaganda and phishing and scams that go out there. So everyone should just be extra diligent in this election year.
Yeah. It's
absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank
you all for
Happy New Year, everyone.
Be safe and secure in 2024.
And we'll talk in January. Take care.
Take care.